I'm a fifth generation Albertan. My daughter, I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's a sixth generation Albertan, and we'd like to have a seventh generation in this province. But the way things are going in this province, unless we can get Alberta out of Canada, there'll be no future for my daughter in this province, let alone my grandkids in this province. If people would just with an open mind would take a look at what's on offer and what's possible in a free and independent Alberta, people go like, why the heck do we want to stay in Canada?
Welcome to Citizen, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, good to see you guys. Good to have you. Today's a pretty cool episode. I'm excited to actually jump into the topic and get some answers, some clarity into a very big topic, especially when it comes to where we live.
And that topic is Alberta independence.
There you go.
Been circulating for a while. We've been actually, well, you're talking decades in terms of the idea, but it's been having a lot of momentum and steam over the last period of time. Right now, you got a lot of people. We're going to get to the bottom of the answers of how many people are canvassing. We're going to find out, hey, where are we at with signatures? We're going to be finding out, does it look like it's actually going to happen? Where does the UCP government stand on it? Where does Pierre Poilievre? Everything we want to know, we're going to be asking.
The other major thing is that there's such a diverse perspective on this whole idea of independence, depending where you're from. Like I have a lot of Winnipeg friends who just it could be largely, I think, because the news is such a monopoly that the perspective, if it's CBC reporting on it, that it's completely one-sided. And so that's why we exist. That's why we have conversations like this, so we can kind of show both perspectives and get the actual conversation to the top. So,
yep. Well, without any further ado, Mr. Jeff Rath, thank you for joining us again.
Welcome back.
Well, it's such a pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having me on.
I actually have this clip loaded. I thought it'd be a fantastic place to start. If you guys are open to it. I know you probably have 80 questions, but all the rage last week, as you know, was Pierre Poilievre on Joe Rogan. It was everywhere. It got 4 million views or something like that. And he's mentioned this when it came to Alberta separation, so I'll play it, and then we have some thoughts on it, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Let's hear it.
Talk about Alberta separating.
That won't happen.
What was that about?
It won't happen. Some people are frustrated, but they, there's some legitimate frustrations. But at the end of the day, Canada's going to be united. And Albertans, I'm born and raised Alberta, and Albertans are seriously patriotic Canadians.
Very patriotic.
Yeah, they're great people, hardworking.
Some of the nicest people you ever
They
run
are
across.
great people in
Hardy.
Alberta. They are a hardy people.
It's cold up there. They know how to survive.
Exactly. You got to be tough to survive the cold in
Yeah.
Canada. Carve a country like we have out of that cold weather on that big open land. But people just keep on going. And Alberta's got a real kind of rugged individualism.
Yes.
So that I found it interesting how his absolutely not happening. No, not even any room he gave there. What's your initial thoughts on that?
Well, we call that AIDS, Alberta Independence Denial Syndrome. Just that's it, right? I mean, it's a sub branch of Alberta Independence Derangement Syndrome, but it's a syndrome nonetheless. And again, to me, it just demonstrates how out of touch Pierre is with what used to be his home province. I mean, he's lived in Ottawa basically for 31 years now. I think he's lived in Ottawa now longer than he's lived in Alberta. And he really only came back here because he was rejected by the voters in Ottawa-Carleton. And, he's now technically an Albertan again. But, that having been said, he ran the last election campaign saying that he's not going to do anything to get rid of equalization. He's not going to do anything to address the 10-to-1 disparity between Alberta and Quebec dairy licenses. I mean, think about that for a second, right? Quebec has barely twice the population of Alberta. It's less than twice now, right? They have 4,500 dairy licenses in Quebec. Alberta has less than 400, or has 400.
Really?
So, Pierre's not doing anything about that. I was jokingly during the last, when he was running in Battle River Crowfoot, it's like, hey, Pierre, I have a slogan for you. No more money for Quebec and a micro dairy in every barn. I dare you. Right? And of course, he didn't have the guts to do it. So there you go.
Do you think he's saving face with that? That's his maybe his campaign manager's PR perspective on this?
With his Rogan response?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't expect anything different from him.
Yeah.
As a guy who's running for prime minister, it doesn't look good, even if internally you think there is real momentum and legitimate things like he said. But it doesn't look good for anyone who wants to
Wouldn't
run
it be in his
for
interest,
Canada.
though? It's like strategically, wouldn't it be in his interest to say, hey, look, the current leadership is dividing the country, and I will unite it. Like, don't you think that would be a wise approach if he actually, like, that's why I was like, man, for him to be so black and white and be like, nope, not happening, and then just move on.
And even politically, like, one would think, this is what Mark Carney has done to Canada. The country is on the verge of breaking up because Mark Carney refuses to address the legitimate grievances of Alberta. He's on the verge of destroying the country. I mean, some sense of urgency on his part would behoove him. But that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. No, that's not going to happen. And quite frankly, it demonstrates to me that he's completely out of touch with Alberta. I mean, the majority of the constituents in Battle River Crowfoot favor independence. A super majority of his constituents in Battle River Crowfoot favor independence. There was a Leger poll after the last federal election that actually said that 70% of conservative voters in the last election now support independence after Carney won. So if you hear Danielle Smith say, well, 42% of Albertans support independence, that's where that comes from, because 60% of Albertans voted conservative in the last election. 70% of those people now favor independence, right? So you do the math, 60% of 70% is 42%. I think that's where Danielle got that number. On the basis of the Leger poll, 42% of Albertans a year ago favored independence. And we think the numbers are much higher now because, we've had that sham MOU that everybody knows was a joke. I mean, Danielle just did it to save face. She made an ultimatum, if you don't do this in 6 months, it's or else. And then the 6 months came and she was desperate on her knees begging Mark Carney to fly to Calgary to sign that stupid MOU that we all knew at the time, wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. I mean, that's why Danielle got booed at the AGM this year every time she mentioned the MOU, because Albertans have all been around the block. We've seen the National Energy Program. We know the devastation of the Alberta economy through bad policies in Ottawa, right? So she signs this MOU. The day after the MOU, the ink isn't even dry on the paper, and Mark Carney is running around bragging that the MOU opens a door to a 6 times increase, 600% increase to industrial carbon tax in Alberta, right? And Danielle's saying, oh, it's not 600%, it's only 40%. It's like from 90 to 130. Well, still, why are you bragging about a 44% increase in the industrial carbon tax in Alberta? There's no industrial carbon tax in Alaska. There's no industrial carbon tax in Texas. So, if you got money to invest in the oil industry, why the heck would you come to Alberta?
The carbon tax, any country who wants to take its economics seriously does not go forward. It is a killer. We know that going through. But I know you and Bruce Party have gone back and forth on X a number of times, but one of the points I love that he says is he goes, the problems with contracts and law is that they're written in words, right? And the fact that you got...
Oh, I don't disagree with Bruce on that. I disagree with him on some of the libertarianism that he tries to sell that literally will not sell in Alberta. Like, you're not going to get people to vote for independence if you go, oh, vote for independence and we're going to get rid of public education and public health care.
Well, my point wasn't going that route. My point was the fact of the MOU and all this is Carney gets all the win in it, in the sense that he gets to show what he is moving forward with. And Alberta, there's promises of working towards something, but problem is there's words and there's so much wiggle room and there's so much gray area. It's most likely not gonna.
But it's worse than that, right? So Danielle's running around bragging that she's that this MOU has addressed most of the 9 bad laws and isn't this wonderful? It's going to fix everything in Alberta. But the most important thing that Carney has to do in order for anybody to be interested in building a pipeline, investing in a pipeline, even doing preliminary engineering, or even, getting a pen out and drawing a route on a map, right, is to get rid of Bill C-69, the tanker ban.
Step one.
Right? It has to be step one. Because who is going to invest any capital, even do a $10 million engineering study, right? If it's illegal to offload oil from a pipeline into ships to take it offshore to market, right? So the whole thing is it's offensive to me that, Danielle's running around the province touting this MOU as a win when we all know it was nothing but a face-saving exercise and, quite frankly, an embarrassment to the Premier's office and an insult to the people of Alberta.
Well, let's get back to it was interesting with Pierre's conversation with Joe, because later on in the show he talks about his inspiration for getting into politics, and he references Preston Manning right? National energy program, him holding his fist up, trying to talk about discrepancies between Alberta and federal, and that was his inspiration for getting in. And I thought it was quite quick and dismissive, but I didn't actually expect anything different from Pierre Arnett as someone who's a federalist. But the person who I think has had the best take so far on this, we had Conrad Black on a couple weeks ago. He made a comment on our show. He goes, flat out, I'm a federalist. Like, I want a strong Canada. He goes, but I understand why Albertans, the grievances they have. And he goes, and they have legitimate grievances, real grievances. He goes, I want them to stay because I think it's best for Canada. But if essentially, I'm paraphrasing now, if federals don't play ball, he goes, I understand why they want to leave. And frankly, if they leave, they'll become the richest nation, GDP per capita in the world. Yeah. That's one of the statements he made. And it's very interesting, his take on I understand they need to renegotiate.
Well, sure. If you live in Toronto and you love Southern Ontario, you don't want to see Alberta go. I mean, let's face it. Nobody in Ontario wants to see the tax increase that it would take to continue subsidizing Quebec and the Maritimes at the level that they're currently subsidized, right? So, I understand that, but I think people like Conrad need to understand that we're well past any point now where this can be fixed, or that anybody in Alberta rationally, could say that we should be trying to, repair our relationship with Canada. Yeah. Let's be clear. I mean, Alberta has more barrels of oil per capita than Saudi Arabia, right? Wow. We might be the third largest oil resource in the world, but because we have a relatively much smaller population, we have more barrels of oil per capita in Alberta than we do in Saudi Arabia. So why are we paying income tax in Alberta, right? Saudi Arabia doesn't pay income tax. Most of the countries in the Middle East don't pay income tax. We actually did an economic study, and I'll just hold it up for your viewers. It's called The Value of Freedom. The Value of Freedom, a draft fiscal plan for a free and independent Alberta. And what this document sets out is that Alberta sends $70 billion a year to Ottawa. Let me say that again, $70 billion a year to Ottawa, right?
So where's that figure coming from?
Well, it's coming from all of the taxes that are paid in Alberta. So GST, excise tax, carbon tax, capital gains tax, corporate income tax, personal income tax, industrial, all the taxes, including CPP and UI, okay?
And equalization.
No.
Equalization
that leaves us, right?
Got it.
But anyway, so we send $70 billion a year to Ottawa in revenue from Alberta. We get less than $20 billion a year back in cash transfers through the health transfers, CPP and UI, and very questionable federal services. Like, who actually believes we have a national defense and that we're being defended by Ottawa? We're not, right? So,
no doubt.
All these questionable federal services that we could easily replace, right? Mm-hmm. So think about, and again, that document that I just showed you, it's more like a provincial budget document. It doesn't really get into, the economic spinoffs and the massive economic growth that is going to happen once $70 billion stays in Alberta, and all of that money, all $70 billion is spent in Alberta. Think about that. So, in year one, we can afford to double CPP and double OAS, right? In year one, we can afford to completely eliminate federal income taxes in year one. So let's call it 2027. We can completely eliminate federal income taxes in Alberta. I mean, there's still going to be provincial income tax, at the lower rate. There's still going to be, other, provincial revenues that, to keep the government operating and the lights on, et cetera. But, right, all of the federal income tax. So if everybody wants to take out their pay stub and put a circle around the federal income tax portion of their pay stub, right, that money all stays in their pocket. So let's say you have a police officer married to a nurse. The police officer is making, 100, 105,000 a year. Nurse is making 120 to 150 or more, right? Mm-hmm. Collectively in federal income tax, that couple is paying over $50,000 a year to the federal government. All of that money would stay in their bank account, would stay in their pockets. And then what happens with that money, right? It gets spent in Alberta. They put an addition on their home. They buy a new car. They, buy more stuff for their kids. They have better family vacations. They improve their, they buy a recreational property. They buy a motorhome, whatever it is. But that money all stays in Alberta. instead of going to Quebec. Like right now, we send $15 billion a year to Quebec. Quebec can have zero tuition in its universities. It's got some of the lowest tuition rates in Canada. But if an Albertan wants to go to school in Quebec to attend one of these Quebec universities that we pay for, right? Yeah. A kid from Alberta would have to pay a foreign student rate in Quebec to go to school in Quebec. Well, Quebec students, thanks to Albertans, thanks to the parents of those kids in Alberta, get to go to school for free. Like, how does that work, right?
For those who want to see this document, we'll have it linked here. You can see it. It's quite extensive, actually. I really want to encourage people to, even if you're a skeptic of this, it covers all the bases. Overview of integrated, independent Alberta financial landscape, sustainability and environment, Alberta's sovereign Indigenous people and independent Alberta, dealing with fraudulent qualifications toward a great economic future. It covers all the bases. So if you have questions, look at this document. I would encourage people. I'm going to go through it myself. RCMP funding, policing, Canada Pension Plan, transfer, Alberta pension. It just keeps going and going. So it covers a lot of the bases that I think there's a lot of questions from the people who don't know this conversation and don't know the details. That's the question I was going to ask you, and you've kind of started to answer it. But like, for people who don't know the ins and outs of all this, what kind of Alberta is on the other side of this? All I hear a lot of people saying when and if this were to happen, that there'd be pain. But what you just exclaimed was actually a lot of...
It's quite the opposite, right? It's quite, it's literally the opposite. Like, it was really funny. Obviously, I'm trying to behave myself today, so yeah. I've become quite a polarizing figure to a certain degree, and a lot of it's my fault. But I'll own it. But anyway, This Hour Has 22 Minutes was making fun of me the other week, right? And as they sometimes do.
That's a badge of honor.
Just so you know, that's an arrival point as a Canadian.
That's amazing.
No, that's like getting an appearance on The Simpsons in the United States. I feel like that is an arrival.
Well, they've made fun of me a couple of times. I've been on a couple shows now. But anyway, a couple weeks ago, they've got this pudgy comedian on This Hour Has 22 Minutes, the kind of Jason Kenney lookalike guy. And he likes making fun of my weight and making fun of this and making fun of that, whatever, right? But he's going, and he can't do math, right? And he goes, he thinks that they can have zero income tax in Alberta. How ridiculous is that? Does he not know that the federal income tax contribution from Alberta to Canada is $15 billion a year? Where's that $15 billion going to come from? And then, of course, my response to that is, okay. We send $15 billion a year to Quebec every year in equalization. We're not going to be doing that anymore. That's where our 100% federal income tax cut is going to come from, right? It's not math. It's simple budget reallocation, right? And all of those numbers are set out in this document, in the Value of Freedom document.
Who put together the document?
It was fantastic. We had a team of people that we put together. It started out with me recruiting a gentleman by the name of Dennis Kalma, who literally, as part of his career, worked around the world installing supercomputers, right? Wow. In the Netherlands and elsewhere, right? And then he was working for CP Rail, and he was in charge of all their economic forecasting and business planning on basically all their big projects over $100 million kind of thing. And so had a very extensive business background, huge background in computing, AI systems, all that kind of stuff. So Dennis was basically our lead on this project. And then we had bankers involved. We had accountants, actuaries, economists. This whole thing went through a sort of massive vetting process. Through a team of integrated professionals. And that's where we ended up at the end of the day, right? And this document, it's interesting. It's been looked at by the economists for the Parti Québécois. So, we've become, we've developed a fairly strong working relationship with, Pierre Plamondon, Saint-Pierre Plamondon and the Parti Québécois in Quebec. And he said that their economists had looked at the document and they go, boy, that's really conservative. Like, Alberta's going to be way better off than set out in that document. And of course, Pierre says, why did you guys do that? My economists tell you that document's really conservative in terms of your numbers and that you're going to be so much better off and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, Pierre, it's like, because we're Albertans, we always under promise and over deliver, right? Yeah. And we didn't want to overstate things. We didn't want
conservative is the better route to go.
No, well, exactly. But we intentionally designed that document on the conservative side. And like I said, the one thing that this document does not fully capture is the economic boom and the explosion of wealth that is going to occur in this province the day after independence. Because, there's Jason Kenney running around the province saying, oh, the uncertainty and businesses are going to leave Alberta. I was laughing. I was at a town hall a while ago, and somebody asked that question. And I said, okay, how many people here are business people that are actually in business, started their own business, ran their own business? So people raised their hands. And I said, okay, so all the business people that operate in business, have you ever heard of a business saying, well, I got to close my business and leave. I need to go somewhere else because I want to operate in a jurisdiction that regulates me more and taxes me more. Like, I can't stay here. They're not going to tax me enough and regulate me enough. I have to leave, right? Because, nobody,
Sure.
right?
Exactly.
Absolutely nobody.
Yeah.
So, this whole suggestion that businesses are going to leave Alberta and all the rest of it is completely ridiculous. The businesses that are upset about it, and I mean ATCO with their cost plus contracts, government, the businesses that thrive on government subsidies and government graft, and I'm sure the businesses that are invested in, Pathways Alliance as an example, the giant carbon sucking machine, that we want to put out of business. Those types of businesses probably aren't going to do so well here. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But all of that capital, all of those billions of dollars, can be invested in, actual, businesses, right? That, that expand the economy, right?
Yeah.
Because, like listening to Secretary of State Bessent, I mean, the United States has completely opened the door to a pipeline from Alberta through Montana, Idaho, and Oregon or Washington to the U.S. West Coast. So, we can have, as many pipelines as we want from a free and independent Alberta. And the other thing on that, because that's the big thing we get, is, Alberta will be landlocked, right? Well, let's talk about that, right?
Can you hold on
Sure.
that for 1 second?
Yeah,
No, because you're
I'm
going,
off on a.
No, you're good though.
No,
but
it's good,
you're
it's
going
good.
over a lot of things I think need to be fleshed out because these are important pieces that people have questions for.
Sure.
And in a couple minutes, I want to do some rapid fire questions with you and your thoughts, talking about landlocked, talking about energy deals,
Sure.
talking about all that because that's important.
It's your show. I'll behave.
You're doing well so far. You're doing well. No, it's just I want to take us on a little bit of a path so people are walking because there's a lot of airplay that you've had from CTV to lots of shows and others talking about the pros and the reasons why Alberta wins with independence. So no doubt that's out there, and we'll continue to flesh it out because you can't understate that. Want to ask first off before we get there, the bottom line: where are we at in the movement with independence? I want to know how many signatures does Alberta or the canvassers, how many have they acquired?
We have over 7,000 canvassers right now. They are the heart and soul and backbone of this movement.
Wow.
7,000?
7,000 registered canvassers. They're out beating the bushes. They've got pop-ups all over the province. We have permanent locations for signing all over the province.
Okay.
You go to stayfreealberta.com and literally you can find a permanent location nearest you.
Okay.
So if you haven't signed the petition yet, you got to get out and sign. Like, get out and sign like the lives of your children and your grandchildren depend on it, because they do, right?
Okay.
So stayfreealberta.com. You can find a location near you. If you're on X, follow stayfreealberta.com at stayfreealberta, I think it is, or follow Alberta at Alberta Prosperity Project, or follow any of the other independence influencers on X. I'm at Jeffrey R.W. Rath, my buddy Keith Wilson I think it's Keith Wilson.
We'll make sure all of those
you know,
details are on
whatever.
the bottom of the
I mean,
show.
we're all there, and generally all of us, every time we see a pop-up location somewhere, we're reposting it on X and sharing the information, and and so on, right? So
how many signatures do you have? You haven't answered my question.
No, and we've agreed as a campaign that we were not going to release the numbers because we don't want people slacking off when we're over the statutory number. What I say to everybody is I want everybody to go out there, and for all of our canvassers, God bless you for the work you're doing. You're literally saving the lives of every kid in this province, going forward, making it so that young people are going to be able to afford their own home, afford their own apartment, move out of mom and dad's house, get out of this miserable economy that Ottawa's created. God bless all of you for working so hard for your fellow citizens, right? But I want everybody to campaign. I want everybody to canvass. And I want everybody to get out there and sign like we're 100,000 signatures behind, right? Because the point of that is our goal is actually 1 million signatures, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've said from the beginning, we've been on track from day one to make the statutory requirement. I mean, I can, you just do the math. How many signatures do you need a week? You need 12,000 signatures a week. We've been crushing that number from week one. That's all going very well, but we need to get to that 1 million signature mark, which is 62,000 signatures a week, right?
Wow.
So
if this was a video game, would we be winning the game or losing the game?
Well,
he just gave us some math we can do.
Yeah,
he said 1,000 signatures a week, crushing since day one. Let's crunch some numbers.
Right. So
what is the stat number again? The statutory number has to be
178,000 signatures
by the end of April or
by May 2nd.
And what step of this is? This is to trigger a process?
Well, no. Then once we have our signatures, then the chief electoral officer verifies the signatures, and then they're communicated to the legislature of Alberta. But just to finish my point, sorry, I was a bit long-winded.
No.
We want to get to 1 million signatures, and the reason why is that's 56% of the people who voted in the last election. At that point, independence becomes undeniable. Everybody that signs the petition, it's a radicalizing act. I mean, people are going, you know what? I'm committed to this. I'm committed to the future of my kids. I'm committed to my grandkids. I am committed to a future in this province. I am an Albertan. I am a real Albertan. I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm, signing my name to moving forward to a free and independent Alberta. And I'm going to save my province, and I'm going to save my kids, and I'm going to save my grandkids and create a beautiful future for all of us. Right. So, once people are committed to that point, that's literally going to become the core. That's going to become our army that we're going to be driving forward through the referendum campaign, to get us to a yes vote in October, on October 19th, right?
Has that date been set?
That date has been set by Danielle, and I think as a result of a lot of the pressure that we've put on her, she's now agreed, because I've been really annoyed from day one about this idea that we're going to have this, like a Polyev long ballot.
7 or 8 other referendum
7 or 8 other
that were
ridiculous questions on a ballot along with our question. We've been saying from day one that our question should be the only question on a ballot. So she's now giving us our own separate ballot for our question, is what she has said. So we're grateful for that.
On a different day or still the same day?
Well, still the same day.
Okay.
So, but that having been said, we still think that ours, there should be just a one vote, one question on the independence question, because all of the other questions that are being asked are resolved with independence, right? In, immigration, courts, constitution, all of those things are resolved by voting yes to independence, right?
And those questions that were posed, though, it's already within the provincial jurisdiction to act.
It's worse than that.
Am I not?
No,
I think I'm right on that.
You're absolutely 100% correct on that. Because it's political. These questions that Danielle wants to put, or that Rob Anderson wants to put on the ballot, and Danielle's putting on the ballot, being within Danielle's jurisdiction. What's really offensive to a lot of us is every one of those questions fell within what was called the Free Alberta Strategy. Okay. Which was the platform. It was literally the platform that Danielle ran on for premier. Yeah. Okay. So she has a mandate to do everything that she's asking. Let's take immigration as an example. We all know that immigration right now in Alberta is a complete disaster. And Danielle has the power to stop it. I mean, she can just pass a bill saying every employer, right, hiring these people, right, has to post a $50,000 bond for, to take care of healthcare. So when they use our, when they use our emergency rooms as a walk-in clinic, 50,000 bond for education. If they come over here, these people.
That would stop the employers from hiring.
Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point, right? And Danielle has the jurisdiction to do it, and she won't do it. So it's literally like the house is burning down, and instead of calling the fire department, she said, okay, well, we're going to, the house is burning down, so we're going to talk about the house being on fire for 6 months, and then we're going to have a referendum on whether I should call the fire department. Like it makes absolutely no sense, and from my way of thinking, it's a complete lack of leadership.
It's going to a little off on where I wanted to go with this, but yeah, it's a good point. What is their strategy with it? Like if you're thinking strategically,
yeah, like
why is it a win for them to throw a bunch of these from their, like, in their shoes? If you're walking,
well,
in their shoes,
Danielle has publicly stated that it is her job to ensure a no vote on independence, right? And, I think Nenshi was criticizing her the other week and saying, well, why aren't you leading the movement against Alberta independence? And, whatever. Danielle says, I am. Everything I do is to keep Alberta in Canada. And, I am leading the movement. I'm leading it through my actions. I'm leading it through my agreements with Mark Carney. And I love Mark Carney. And Mark Carney and I are such good friends. And we're going to solve Alberta independence. And once Albertans realize how lovely Mark Carney is and what a wonderful guy he is, they're going to change their minds and want to stay in Canada.
She's always been very clear on a strong Alberta within Canada.
That was a bait and switch. That was a pure bait and switch.
The language has shifted over the last.
100%. So, and keep in mind, I was there. I was a witness, firsthand witness to all of this stuff through all of it. Okay. So, and I'll state for the record, I did not support Danielle for the leadership because I didn't believe her. I didn't believe anything she said. She stabbed everybody in the Wild Rose in the back when she crossed the floor. She has no personal loyalty to anybody. I understand.
For those who don't know, he's going back in some Alberta provincial history.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Danielle
was the leader of the Wild Rose Party.
Yeah, formerly the leader of the Wild Rose Party of Alberta, and became the only leader of a political party in the history of the Commonwealth to cross the floor to the opposing party in advance of an election, right? And stabbed all of her members and MLAs in the back, okay? And so I didn't trust her when she was running for the leadership, but she came to an APP leadership forum and said, "Oh yes, if you vote for me, I'll be here for you." Ezra Levant asked her, well, you talked this good game. What's the or else if Canada isn't going to give Alberta what it needs? She goes, well, the or else is Dennis Modry and the Alberta Prosperity Project, meaning independence, right? So Danielle becomes leader of the party and effectively premier of Alberta, with the support of probably 90%, 90% of the people that voted for her were pro-independence, right? And then she campaigns to become premier on the Free Alberta strategy that Rob Anderson put together, right? And keep in mind, the Free Alberta strategy was a strategy to prepare Alberta for complete sovereignty, right?
So can I push back on that for a second?
Sure.
So was that stated or is that assumed? Because when you look at Free Alberta principles, like it talks about increased autonomy from Ottawa, from federal, right? Fighting the federal intervention, unlocking Alberta energy, so it's not restricted, tax reductions, etc. But was it stated in there?
But the whole point of the Free Alberta strategy was to prepare Alberta for full independence, okay? And that was the campaign that she ran on. Not independence now, but in the future.
Did she use language we could find on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, is that clear?
I'm not sure, but certainly when she was campaigning to become leader and when she was campaigning to become premier, she was campaigning for a sovereign Alberta, not a sovereign Alberta within the United Canada. She was campaigning for this Alberta Sovereignty Act, right? Then she gets elected. And lo and behold, this is the bait and switch. It goes from the Alberta Sovereignty Act that she campaigned on to the Sovereign Alberta within a United Canada Act, right? Okay. So pure bait and switch. Okay. And and then we've been listening to that nonsense ever since. Oh, I believe in a strong Alberta within a United Canada.
Well, I think when it comes to Premier Smith, so a couple of things she has done is she lowered the threshold of signatures.
Oh, sure, and we're grateful for that. We're grateful for that.
And then she's also stated it's a citizens movement. Because I don't expect, as an Albertan, I don't expect Premier to lead the charge for me, to be honest. Do you, as another Albertan who's obviously, with you essentially are kind of the face of Alberta independence, you and you got a couple others.
And Mitch, of course, is the
Mitch yourself. Yeah. There's a number of you.
Well, I want to add to that, though, a little bit, because like you think about this strategically. If you were in the seat of the premier and you don't actually legitimately know who supports this or not, don't you think that one of her strategic things would be, let's see, because if the majority of the province does, they want to stay in power, they want to strategically lead the province. So if the majority does and they don't know it, they're in trouble, huge trouble.
There's a great old saying though: lead, follow, or get out of the way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And she's not getting out of the way. Like, she's actively out there saying, "I want to keep Alberta in Canada," and and she even. She'll even get up and, the numbers aren't as good as they say and the value of freedom and blah, blah, blah. Danielle actually passed a resolution through the UCP provincial board prior to the last AGM saying that we couldn't have any debates on independence on the floor of the AGM and that that there could be no resolutions on the floor at the AGM in support of independence. That's actually what prompted me back in November to stand up at the UCP AGM and ask everybody in the room in front of the premier and her cabinet, whether they supported Alberta independence.
I saw that.
And that question got a standing ovation from 85 to 95% of the people in the room.
I saw that, yeah.
right? And then after that, every time Danielle opened her mouth about the MOU, she was roundly booed, right? And then the only stuff that she would get applause for, would be all the red meat stuff on you can shoot people that break into your house and the, all the, sort of all the red meat conservative base stuff. But we're now at a point where the UCP itself, the base of the party, there's a super majority in that party that favored Alberta independence. Like more than 66% of the UCP base is completely in favor of Alberta independence. They're not in favor of a strong Alberta within a united Canada.
And you know that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've seen the polling. No, we've seen the polling. We had the demonstration of the people at the UCP base. We have that Leger poll.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incontrovertible, right? And so we've got this problem where we've got Danielle making these federalist noises and saying that she's a federalist when only less than a third of her own party supports staying in Canada.
Wow.
So she's on thin ice politically. So.
She's definitely walking a fine line, whether you throw in personal ambition and also what's best for Alberta, is that this is, even if independence or the referendum doesn't go forward, she's potentially going to suffer a lot of loss in terms of votes in support.
Keith Wilson went so far yesterday on Rebel News. Keith and I were on Rebel together on the Buffalo wrap-up or wind-up, right? On Rebel yesterday. Keith is now firmly on my side of the fence on this, which is, Keith was a big supporter of Danielle's and a big believer in Danielle's. And finally, 6 months later, he just doesn't believe her anymore. All the stuff that she's saying about the MOU isn't true. She hasn't got rid of any of the bad laws. Just read Keith's Twitter feed. You'll see what I mean. And, Keith went so far yesterday as to say that if the referendum succeeds and a majority of Albertans support independence, and Danielle doesn't become a fervently pro-separatist premier, she's going to have to resign. And I go, wow, is that Keith Wilson talking? That sounds an awful lot like Jeff Rath.
Well, Keith has been a great voice as well, bring a lot of, because that's what we really try to do. Even though we're pushing back at different times, we always want to find what is the pros and cons. I love playing devil's advocate. For this because
it has to,
because there's a ton of citizens in Alberta that understand Alberta has not been in a great position, and they're seeing it economically. They're seeing it every day in their life. They're seeing it in grocery prices. They're seeing it all over. On a side note, there's no reason why our gas at the base should be $1.76 right now with what we have in the ground here, if we've been preparing for things like this.
We have refineries. Keith just posted something on it yesterday. We have refineries that are putting out 565,000 barrels a day of refined product in Alberta. Why are we paying $1.70 a liter for gas?
And but you have a lot of people who understand, okay, we need better situation in Alberta, but they'd be afraid of the uncertainty that comes with a potential
the uncertainty that comes with train loads of money staying in the province of Alberta. I mean, I'm
gonna finish my point.
Sure.
I know we'll get to that because you guys have been good advocates for that. On a side note, if we were able to get former Premier Honorable Jason Kenney with us, say one more time, the former Premier Jason Kenney with us, would you be willing to have a conversation with him and us as we talk about the pros and cons?
I would love that.
Because this is a formal invitation to look at the camera to the Honorable former Premier Jason Kenney. We'd love to have you on in Citizen in Calgary with Jeff Rath. We'll have a long-form conversation. We'll bring in some nice coffee. We'll talk. We'll make it fun. Get some answers because citizens deserve to hear both sides at the same time and have real constructive conversation. That's what we believe in. So official invite is out. Paul, clip it, throw it out there. You're amenable to that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd happily sit down and have a pleasant conversation with Jason Kenney. It'd be nice to, dispense with, his calling me names on Twitter and just sit down and talk like human beings. I think it'd be
we'll
great.
avoid all that.
Yeah, sure.
And just
100%.
About the raw facts and what's going on, and everyone can have their opinions and agree to disagree, but that's what I think more people need to see as well, because unfortunately, Canada and Alberta politics, we've just moved to more echo chambers where people love shouting at each other from across the chasm. And let's get back into the room to have real constructive conversations. So
I know we're going deep here, but I kind of wouldn't mind retracting a little bit. What about some of the fears of the people who are not so deep into this? We don't know all the ins and the outs of it all. Hospitals, is free healthcare, like policing.
And I think that's why people really need to go and read that the Value of Freedom document, because people that are worried about healthcare in Alberta, how's healthcare in Alberta going to be worse if Alberta's fiscal capacity surplus increases by $47 billion a year.
So
There's going to be more money for healthcare. There'll
Yeah.
be more money for schools. There'll be more money for pensions. There'll be more money for for Alberta's Indigenous people.
Yeah.
Like, and again, that's a subject that comes up all the time. And,
Yep.
And my question for all of the chiefs is like, why do you think your people are going to be worse off if we're no longer sending $15 billion a year to Quebec and all of that money stays in Alberta and a good chunk of that money can be going to improving the lives of, of your communities?
So you're
right?
saying essentially the same system, actually probably better, more financing, more ability to have universal healthcare. You're saying same idea?
Oh yeah, for sure. But I mean, what we'd be doing is we're going to have a constitution that's going to be, putting strict limits on government and government waste.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I think all of us think that we can, increase the efficiency of government
For sure.
by reducing the size of the civil service by a good 40 or 50%. And we believe that we can reduce the size of the civil service by 40 or 50% and still provide all of the so-called services that are currently being provided by the federal government.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I just spoke with someone yesterday who got diagnosed with cancer here in Alberta, and they told them that they had 6 months to a year to live, and that their treatment was
Made?
I didn't get that far, but the treatment was very limited. He flew to Phoenix immediately after, was being treated 4 days later with a very specific chemo that was targeting based on blood tests, DNA, et cetera, and they've told him, no, you don't have 6 months to a year. You've got far better than that. In fact, we actually think you have 5 to 10 years, and if anything, we might be able to beat this. Two drastically different views. And so immediately he's like, I'm never doing Canadian approach on this ever again. Like,
no, I know it's just absolutely disgusting that, and look at Bill Mackus, right? I mean, Bill's, basically been run out of the province. He's one of the top oncologists in Canada. And, the Alberta College of Physicians and Surgeons have pulled his medical license. And thank God for Florida. They've issued him a medical license. And,
Have we had him on? I thought we had him on at some point.
And, Bill's now taking all of his skills and knowledge and expertise to Florida, and he's going to be operating a cancer clinic in Florida. Eric Payne's another one. I mean,
we had Eric.
Payne.
Eric was a client of mine. I supported Eric all the way through COVID when, those cretins at the College of Physicians and Surgeons were trying to take his medical license away.
Okay.
And, go ahead.
No, it's good. It's how my brain works. I'm going to go back to what we talked about.
No, we're all
15
over the
minutes
place
ago.
here.
No, it's good though. And if we take tangents, we will. So we're going to go right back to the beginning. I didn't get an answer on the votes, which is fine. You guys are keeping it to yourself.
No, we're saying we want everybody to go out and
to
campaign.
Canvas hard and go there.
No, like we're
which is
100,000 signatures
We talked
behind.
about the amount, the threshold that has to go past. Talk about the date of May 2nd, I believe you said. Threshold is passed come May 2nd. You guys are preparing for October referendum question. We talked about the referendum questions being separate. Okay, at that point, first off, real rapid fire question. How do you feel about where Alberta is at in terms of having the 50% plus one vote when referendum happens?
We think we're going to win the referendum.
Okay, so you think you'll get the 50%?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Because just because people don't sign the petition doesn't mean they're not going to vote yes. I mean, it's pretty hard to vote against no income tax. You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty hard. How do you vote against zero income tax? Oh, I want to keep paying my income tax. I better vote to stay in Canada.
For people who might not believe it, right?
No, but that being said, I mean, we'll prove it. And I mean, and quite frankly, I'm really excited this weekend. I'm going to that Sean Newman Cornerstone gathering on the weekend.
That's right.
As a guest of Silver Gold Bull.
Okay.
Great folks, by the way, Silver Gold Bull. And anyway, I'm going to meet Martin Armstrong.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about that. Martin Armstrong is one of the best, one of the leading predictive economists in the world, right? And, Martin predicted a year ago that Alberta would be independent within 2 years, just on the basis of economics. And he has this model where he looks at politics and economics and he sort of puts it together through various factors and predicts how populations are going to behave, within these parameters. And he predicted that Alberta would be independent in 2027. And, Martin, who's a real economist, unlike Trevor Tombe, who, is literally, as far as I'm concerned, one of the leading experts in the world in predictive economics, it makes it clear that, that Alberta is going to become one of the wealthiest countries in the world the minute we become independent from Canada. We are going to, have the highest GDP per capita of any country in the world. We're going to beat Ireland. I mean, compare Alberta to Ireland. Let's start there, right? Ireland is 1/10 the size of Alberta, has the same population, right? Has zero
GDP wise, 1/10.
No. Population size wise, geographically.
Oh, geographically.
1/10 the size of Alberta.
Yeah.
Same population,
Yeah.
right? Has zero oil and gas resources. So no, they've got peat and I think they've got some coal or whatever, but they have no natural gas to speak of, no oil to speak of, right? So they have zero oil and gas, right? And they've managed to build an economy with the highest GDP per capita in the world, in Ireland.
Ireland has it.
Right? And
well.
and there's no reason that, the minute Alberta becomes independent and we cut ourselves loose from the rotting corpse of Canada, that Alberta wouldn't immediately vault past Ireland in terms of GDP per capita. Keep in mind, again, I said it earlier, we have more barrels of oil per capita than Saudi Arabia in Alberta, right? Yep. That entire resource would be freed up, right? No income tax, no carbon tax, no capital gains tax, no corporate income tax. I mean, we could become the lowest taxed, least regulated regime in North America. And you don't think that
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does.
Like anyone in their right mind, in terms of thinking what's best for Alberta, how can you reject that? I want to get to the how though.
And look at this. Wait, hold on a second. I want to say this for a second. This is real time numbers for people. Retail worker making $35,000 a year, which is on the lower side of the income, would be saving with no federal tax $3,500 a year, which is $290 a month. Someone who makes $45,000 would be saving $5,000 a year. Someone who makes let's go a little higher here, $110,000 a year would be saving $1,300 a month, which is $16,000. Are you
eliminating just federal tax?
Only federal. This is somebody, a small business owner who makes $150,000 would be saving $25,000 a year, which is $2,000 a month. That's a mortgage payment. Surgeon, $300,000
payment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Surgeon, $300,000 would be saving $60,000 a year, which is $5,000 a month. Like, talk about an incentive to stay. Like again,
or to leave, you mean?
Well, yeah, it depends on which way you look at that. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean it's a massive incentive to leave Canada. There's no doubt about it. Wow. And that's what, that's what I want people to focus on. We in the independence movement, those of us that support Alberta independence, we know what we are getting when we vote yes. No more federal income tax, no more federal regulation, nobody taking our firearms away. Nobody telling us that our oil can't be shipped in tankers off the West Coast because the UN Treaty on Access to the Law of the Sea would cover that. The other thing too, on the landlocking issue, because it all ties in, right? This is Jason Kenney's big bugbear. Oh my goodness, we'll be isolated and blah, blah, right? Well, think about the leverage Alberta is going to have against British Columbia, right? Once Alberta becomes independent. Because keep in mind, 90% of our trade is north-south between Canada and the US, right? Only 10% of our trade is east-west with the rest of Canada, right? British Columbia, 70% of its trade is with the rest of Canada going east.
Yeah, out of the main route, right?
Going out of Vancouver, right? So BC doesn't want to give us a pipeline. So we say, okay, BC, we're a sovereign independent country. We have our own armed forces. We have our own borders, whatever. You don't want to give us a pipeline. Well, we're really, proud of our status as a rat-free jurisdiction in the province, in the country of Alberta, right? And in order to maintain that, we're going to stop all of your trucks and all of your trains at the Alberta border. And it might take a week, might take 2 weeks, might take 3 weeks, might take a month, because we're going to have to inspect all of your trains and trucks for rats, because we don't want any Vancouver rats coming through Alberta and getting off in Alberta, staying in Alberta. So we're going to inspect all of your stuff for rats, and that's going to delay shipping to Ontario. And then we're going to have our customs inspectors go on board, and we're going to put a throughput tariff on all the goods that come through Alberta. Or you can just stop being a pain in the ass and let us have our pipeline, right? That's real leverage. We don't have that now. Now we have to rely on the federal government exercising their interprovincial trade power to tell the province that we have exclusive jurisdiction over interprovincial works. You don't have a veto, and this pipeline will get built, whether you like it or not. The federal, we rely on the federal government to do that. They won't do it, right? We have way more leverage as an independent country with British Columbia.
Well, there's also international law.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That the access to the law of the sea treaty, right? Yeah. But again, as we've already found out, through myself, Dennis Modry, and Mitch Sylvester going to Washington D.C. and meeting with the U.S. State Department, and the U.S. State Department briefing Trump and the Trump cabinet with regard to the aspirations of Alberta, including a pipeline to the U.S. West Coast. Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury of the U.S., second most powerful man in the world, if you really understand the power of the U.S. Treasury, right? has said that the U.S. would be open to an Alberta pipeline going to the U.S. Pacific Northwest.
Will you let us know who you're talking with down in the U.S.? I asked this last show.
Yeah, no. But let's put it this way. I mean, one of the things I'm really happy about was that we've said that, look, we're meeting at a very senior level, and people that are leaving our meetings and going straight to the White House. I think when you watch that interview between Secretary of Treasury Bessett and Jack Posobiec, it was evident that he was very well briefed on our discussions with the State Department. Yeah. So, but we're having very frank, open discussions about the aspirations of Alberta and Albertans for a free and independent Alberta, and having very frank discussions back and forth as to what's realistic in terms of the relationship between a free and independent Alberta and the United States of America. Mm-hmm. First of all, does the United States of America, the current administration, support a free and independent Alberta? The answer is enthusiastically support a free and independent Alberta. Would the United States of America be open to a complete free trade agreement with zero tariffs on both sides of the border with a free and independent Alberta? The answer is, when President Trump says he believes in reciprocal free trade, that means zero tariffs equals zero tariffs. They are firmly committed to that principle and would be open to a zero tariff free trade agreement with the province of Alberta, mm-hmm. or the country of Alberta. Right.
Okay.
Et cetera.
That's all big deals.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Would the United States of America be open to a military alliance with the country of Alberta? Absolutely. All of those things, are on the table. And that's the feedback that we are getting. Right. Yeah. So, and I find that, of course, very encouraging. That's why we went down in the first place, because we did it through the auspices of the Alberta Prosperity Project, which Dr. Modry and I were involved in co-founding. Right. Mm-hmm. And the point of the Alberta Prosperity Project is to educate our fellow Albertans on the benefits of Alberta independence. And of course, we say, look, one of the big questions is, well, what's the United States going to say about that? Well, let's go find out. So, we went down to DC and we found out, and the answers that we were getting, and the tone of the meetings that we've had, and the welcome we received was overwhelmingly positive and overwhelmingly encouraging.
And to be clear, you're not advocating 51st state. You're talking about good relationship as an independent Alberta.
And that was made clear from the original, in the original discussions, right? This whole thing kicked off, like the whole me being associated with the 51st state, started out with, I didn't say we wanted to be the 51st state. I said, it'd be interesting to go down to Washington and talk to the United States as to whether or not Alberta would get a better deal as a U.S. state than we're currently getting as a Canadian province. And then as we started talking about this idea, and we then, started moving on, and, our thinking started, developing a bit further, we put together a delegation of former members of parliament, leading citizens, again, bankers, economists, business people, whatever, to kick this whole idea around. And it became quite evident to us very early on that statehood would not be a benefit for the province of Alberta, right? And, specifically because, we're fighting tooth and nail to get rid of Canadian federal income tax. Like, why do we want to put ourselves under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Treasury and what used to be the IRS, right? Whatever they call it now, right?
Yeah.
So, very early on, we're going, like the whole statehood thing, it appeals to some people, but certainly not what we're going to pursue. And then it became really clear to us, and this is going back now a year and a half. Okay. So we're so well past that it's not even worth talking about, but, it became really clear to us that even within the Alberta independence movement, only the smallest proportion of people in the movement, are advocating or feel really strongly that we should join the United States as opposed to becoming an independent country with, a very strong, cooperative, economic relationship, right?
Yeah.
So, we've been pursuing nothing but ever since. And then our first meeting, with the State Department, literally, we put the nail, the final nail in the coffin. We advised the State Department, in no uncertain terms at our very first meeting that we were interested in pursuing a free and independent Alberta, not statehood, not U.S. territorial status like Guam or Puerto Rico or whatever. We're not talking about statehood. We've never spoken about statehood with the U.S. government or the U.S. State Department, ever.
Jeff, I want to say this, and I'm saying this because it's been quite refreshing to meet you. I'm not just on the show here, but in the green room before. I think you've been painted in the wrong light. And I'm not surprised by that. That's what media
Well, he
does.
took responsibility. He said it's probably my fault.
No, I know.
I'm a very polarizing figure, and I have a sense of humor that sometimes gets the better of me.
Well, and that's what I was kind of alluding to at the beginning with the monopoly of CBC. And so to anyone who's watching this, who maybe I'm refreshed actually by your logic, your reason, your approach to this, because I guess like a question I kind of want to ask you is not the lawyer, not the political advocate. What do you, the man, the citizen of Canada, have to gain from this? What is your? I think I know the answer to that. Is that you want a better Alberta, but I mean, as the man, you believe this is the better road to go down for the people of Alberta.
Oh no, absolutely. And I mean, I'm a fifth generation Albertan. I mean, my family emigrated, like my mom's family came to Alberta in the 1860s, 1870s. From a little place called Kankakee, Illinois. There's a French Canadian community there. They'd all been driven out of Quebec after the Papineau Rebellion, with sort of long family history. So I'm a fifth generation Albertan. My daughter, I have a 15-year-old daughter. She's a sixth generation Albertan, and we'd like to have a seventh generation in this province. But the way things are going in this province, unless we can get Alberta out of Canada and literally get rid of all of the things that Ottawa is doing to turn Alberta into a communist Chinese dependency, which is what they are trying to do, right? There'll be no future for my daughter in this province, let alone my grandkids in this province. Yeah. So, really that's the only reason I'm doing it. I'm not getting paid for, for any of the time that I spend on this. I have no aspirations in the future to ever actually run for public office or, I think Keith Wilson could be the next president of an independent Alberta. Public office and public life isn't for me. Like I hate meetings, like having to sit in meetings with the same people week after week after week. I mean, I couldn't stand doing it. Right. So, I mean, that's why I'm doing it. I love my province. I mean, I love Alberta. I want my children and grandchildren to have a life in Alberta if they want to have a life in Alberta. I want other people's, kids to be able to move out of home, be able to afford an apartment, afford the same things that we could afford, when we were younger. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, the first farm property I bought in the foothills, I mean, it was wasn't that long ago. It was 1993. It was $250,000, right? You couldn't do that now.
Gosh.
I mean, it's, like
I was born 20 years too late.
No, but exactly. No, but it's not, but it's
Jeff, every couple of weeks I'm checking out what properties are coming up for sale and how can I afford that and how do I move outside the city?
Well, no, and I was even like, for me, it took, a couple of years. Like I'd missed a couple really nice quarter sections that were even closer to town that were, $300,000 or $400,000, right? And it was like at the time, I was like a first year, like, oh, that's just that far out of your reach, right? And now those properties would be $10-15 million, right?
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
Okay, so one of the big disconnects, I think, for a lot of citizens in Alberta is the how. And I want to get to, because let's say 50% plus one vote happens. And I'm going to give you a suggestion later, I think, on some communication, which could help people.
Sure.
But 50% plus one happens. And you mentioned earlier when referencing, what's the name of the book again?
The Value of Freedom.
The Value of Freedom, which every citizen should go. Can you hold it up? Go get it on the camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
Every citizen who's interested in Alberta in the sense, hold it at one of those yellow lights there, the green one. They got it. On albertaprosperityproject.com, this outlines essentially the economic advantages plus other issues in terms of independence. That is coming from Alberta Prosperity Project. So let's hypothetical, 50% plus one vote happens in October. You mentioned 2027. When I hear dates of how fast you mentioned, I think in reference of 2027, no tax, blah, blah, blah. For me, the disconnect happens in the time and the process to becoming independent if we get that. So I have several questions in regards to this. You've heard people say this is going to be a decade. Obviously, there's uncertainty. A lot of people wonder about things like, I'm not asking these questions, but they ask like currency, capital flight risk, uncertainty, what happens with military, which we touched on earlier, and all that stuff. What do you think happens after 50% plus one vote in terms of independence? Who's our government? Is the UCP become government? Do they begin
there's still
exit negotiations?
There's still the government, right? So the day after the vote, we succeed, and I think it'll be more like, if I were to get out my crystal
So
ball.
the vote doesn't mean are you suggesting it automatically means to succeed, or it means succeed, or does it mean we basically start telling the federal government cutting ties?
No, well, I mean, so the day that Alberta votes itself out of Canada, which will be October 19th, right? I think if I were to guess, we're going to be between 56 and 60%.
Okay.
Right. Is where I think we're going to end up.
Okay.
Right.
And that's of registered voters or of the population of Alberta?
No, of people voting in the referendum, of the people that turn out and the people that vote.
Got
right?
it. Okay.
So the day after the referendum, Danielle Smith is still the premier, right?
Yep.
The UCP government is still the government of Alberta. We still, what's then going to become the country of Alberta, is still existing within the Canadian Federation under Canadian law, right? But then at that point, Danielle is going to have a choice to make. Is she still a federalist, right? Or is she now going to, fervently embrace taking Alberta out of Canada? If she's not, she's, and Keith Wilson said it yesterday on Rebel News, so I'm not breaking news here. She's going to have to resign, and there's going to have to be a leadership vote for the, for the UCP to elect a leader, right, who will be willing to take Alberta forward to negotiate with the, with the federal government. So that's going to, I would think that would have to happen before Christmas, right? And then, and I think in any event, there should be a leadership vote following a successful referendum. And the reason I say that is that people, within the party should be, given the choice as to whether they want to continue to be led by a leader, who, up until that point had been a federalist and had been, doing things according to her to undermine Alberta independence and to try to keep Alberta in Canada against the wishes of her own party. Okay. So, but anyway, that's, neither here
nor there.
And
she stated those at times that she will respect the will of the citizens. So
sure, but at the same time, as a party, right? And I'm a member of the UCP. As a party, we should be able to have a choice as to who we want to lead us into independence as the leader of the party.
Fair enough,
right? So, because I think that's a very fundamental breaking point, or decision point or inflection point, for the party and for the members of the party. Okay. So I think that needs to happen. Then at that point, the Clarity Act itself sets out the process that has to be followed and the Constitution, right? So at that point, a constitutional convention, involving all of the premiers, right? And then according to section 35.1 of the Constitution Act 1982, and the Indigenous people of Alberta, right? And Canada need to be called to a constitutional conference, right?
Okay.
To discuss Alberta's departure from Canada. Not whether Alberta is going to depart from Canada, not if it's going to depart, but to discuss how it's going to depart from Canada. So effectively at that point, we're going to be negotiating the divorce, right, from Canada. So, Indigenous people and leaders can decide whether they want to remain with Canada, as in, their reserves, the reserves in Alberta can continue to be administered by Canada. Canada can continue to police the treaty relationship with Alberta on a going forward basis. Obviously, there's going to have to be an agreement with Canada between, what will become the independent country of Alberta and Canada, that the country of Alberta will respect the treaties, will,
Would that change borders too of Alberta as we know it?
Well, the borders are going to be the borders as they exist now. The jurisdiction of Alberta and the borders of Alberta are set within the Canadian Constitution.
But Alberta would respect the
national parks within Alberta are going to become instead of becoming the national parks of Canada, they're going to become the national parks of Alberta. The military bases in Alberta are going to become the military bases of Alberta, right? Again, as my buddy Keith Wilson says, he says, but we'll tell Ottawa to take all of their old equipment off the military bases because we're not antique collectors, right? Right? But anyway, so that's how that's going to work. Okay. And Keith and I are already talking about, and he teased it out yesterday, about putting together term sheets. Like we're going to deal with this as as a business deal. Here are the terms. Here are the assets that are being transferred. Here's what you owe us back in pension, what you owe us back in this, what you owe us back in that. Here's the calculation on national parks. Alberta has a 1/10 interest in every other national park in Canada. We'll forgive that for getting 100% of the the national parks in Alberta that'll now become national parks of Alberta. et cetera, et cetera. All the terms will be sorted out. There'll be guarantees with regard to treaty and Aboriginal rights in the province of Alberta, that they'll be honored and respected by the country of Alberta, all of those things going forward. But we're going to have a lot of that stuff all drawn up in advance. We're going to be working on it over the summer. There's a huge team of professionals that are being assembled, right, as we speak, to address all of those issues, right? And
because your career, you've done a lot of work with treaty commitments and treaty obligations and federal commitments in regards to.
I've won more treaty and Aboriginal rights cases than any other lawyer in Canada. And I've certainly won more treaty and Aboriginal rights cases in Alberta than any lawyer in Alberta. Right. So I won.
That's a big concern. Obviously, you've seen Nenshi with chiefs, and you've seen different push forward. What happens when it comes to Indigenous people in Canada and the treaties that pre-exist?
Yeah, and what really kind of upset, like, first of all, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be advocating for Alberta independence if I did not believe in my heart of hearts that Indigenous people in this province were going to be far better off in a free and independent Alberta than they are now. I mean, look at Canada, what they've done to the Indigenous people of this province. Look at the poverty that they live in. I mean, if you go door to door in these communities and you see the way people live in these communities, it would break your heart. Okay, like you've got 3 and 4 generations of a family living in a crappy 1,200 square foot CMHC house that where the CMHC won't let them build anything bigger because of their rules. Doors hanging off hinges, blankets hanging over doors at -40 to keep them from freezing in the winter. A lot of communities, still have communities in Alberta where they have to truck in water, where they don't have safe drinking water. I mean, to me, this is disgusting that we're live in a first world country, living off the resources of the treaty lands of these people, and they live in abject poverty that Canada has intentionally kept them in for 150 years.
Are you suggesting through the Indian Act, or what are you suggesting?
Well, just the system. I mean, I've litigated treaty rights my entire career, right? So do you think Ottawa, if you write them a letter, dear Mr. Minister, you're violating the treaty? Oh, gee, we're really sorry about that. We'll fix that immediately. No, you have to litigate them with them for 10 or 15 years to get a judgment from a court, and then even then they won't do what they're told. So I don't understand where this new love of Ottawa came from all of these chiefs, right? I mean, Ottawa has never been the friend of Indigenous people in this province.
So are you suggesting that off the hop in this negotiation, quote unquote, of divorce, as you put it, that treaty connections within a free and independent Alberta could instantly be much better than its relationship with Ottawa and Canada?
100%. And we set that out in the Value of Freedom document. There's a whole section in this document on Indigenous rights and respect for Indigenous rights in the province of Alberta. And in fact, I was rereading it this morning. I'm going to, if the document's too big for people to read, I'm going to get my assistant to take a copy of the cover, and we'll attach the 3 or 4 pages in that document that deal specifically with Indigenous issues and send them out to every Indigenous community in the province. Okay. Because what we've done, and that document was prepared in consultation with Indigenous leaders in this province, by the way. One of the people that helped develop the Indigenous program in that document was Lawrence Courteray, former chief of Mikisew Cree First Nation, former vice chief of the Assembly of First Nations, a man who spent his entire career fighting for the treaty rights of Indigenous people of Alberta. Mm-hmm. And, if people would just with an open mind would take a look at what's on offer and what's possible in a free and independent Alberta, people go like, why the heck do we want to stay in Canada, right? Like constitutionalized resource revenue sharing that could, literally triple revenues to communities, completely freeing up Indigenous communities with regard to jurisdiction over gaming and, all of these things where they have to go on a bended knee to Edmonton.
Is it kind of a blank check idea is kind of what you're
No, it's not a blank check. It's a recognition of the jurisdiction of, sovereign, Indigenous nations in Alberta and letting communities decide for themselves what's appropriate. Yeah. And at the same time, basically, lifting them out of, this horrible welfare economy that Ottawa has trapped them in. By recognizing their jurisdiction and resources and so on. I mean, it's, we think it's a very, very workable program, and the program that is set out in this document, keep in mind, right, still allows for a $37 to $47 billion a year fiscal capacity surplus in this province that will then pay for all of the tax cuts for everybody else. So First Nations people will still have no income tax, and everybody else in Alberta will have no income tax, right?
So
Wow.
After 50% plus one, the reason, because of the nature of the question, 50% plus one, it's basically you have a majority that says we're done. So you're suggesting, and I know where you stand on this, there's no need to negotiate with Canada now that you've got leverage to stay within Canada. And essentially, you know what I mean?
I'm confused, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll put it this way. People are wondering, and I've been asked this a lot, why not get 50% plus one vote and use that as leverage of saying, we're going to leave unless you come to the table with all of these constitutional amendments and changes.
But that's not what people are voting for. People are voting, do you agree that Alberta, shall cease to be, a province in, cease to be a province in Canada to become an independent state, right? So
the nature of the question, automatically, you have your answer.
Right. And
is that even possible though with the constitutional amendments to even have a fantasy about?
Well, that's the whole problem, right? And everybody knows it. The West wants in. I mean, Preston Manning, God bless him, we all love Preston, has been banging his head against that wall for 50 years and got nowhere. I mean, we even elected, a Reform Party prime minister, Stephen Harper.
Mm-hmm.
He did nothing. He didn't change the constitutional structure of Canada, didn't give us an elected Senate, didn't undo the disparity, 30 Senate seats in the Maritimes with half our population, 6 in Alberta, et cetera, et cetera. Harper did nothing, right? The Canadian Constitution is unamendable. The only way to open up the Canadian Constitution to amendment is for a province to leave. Okay?
Yeah,
so we're doing the rest of the country a huge favor because now it opens the door to the rest of the country being able to amend the Constitution and fix their problems, right? But at the same time, if you think about it, say you're Alberta, right? We have no income tax. We have the highest GDP per capita in the world. Everybody, the entire place is awash with cash. Our kids are happy. They're, they can live, good, productive, working lives, et cetera, et cetera. And then along comes Canada and says, oh, would you like to come back and rejoin us? Because we could always rejoin Canada. Canada will always have us back, right?
Yeah.
Let's be clear, right? Would you like to rejoin Canada? So we go, let me see. So we're going to give up having the highest GDP per capita in the world. We're going to give up zero income tax. We're going to give up all of the advantages and benefits of being a free and independent Alberta so we can go back to paying welfare to the Maritimes, welfare to Quebec, subsidizing Ontario, and being treated like crap on an ongoing basis. Why? Who in their right mind would want that? Right? Like, honestly, like there's no, like if Alberta were free and independent today, with, no income tax, a booming economy, everybody's happy, our kids are productive, all of that, everything's going the way that it should. And then Canada came along and said, hey, we have a deal for you. Why don't you join us? You can pay us 50% of your income in income tax. We'll tell you what to do all the time without any respect for you whatsoever. We're going to, we'll landlock your resources. We're going to mistreat you on an ongoing basis. Anytime you suggest you're being mistreated, we're going to call you a bunch of names and treat you like garbage. Why don't you come and do that? Why don't you join us? Like, people would look at you like you had 3 heads. Like, what?
That's actually a helpful example, though. That's
yeah. I mean, that's where we're coming from, and I think what really bothers me the most is that all the other side has to sell is fear, right? Like when Sun Life insurance company left Quebec, they didn't leave Quebec over just because of independence, right? They left Quebec over language, right? They left Quebec over culture. They left Quebec over socialism and communism, right? Sun Life didn't want to have to, basically fire all of their senior people in their C-suite and replace them with French-speaking, executives, right? So they're going, rather than putting up with this, we're just going to pack up and move to Toronto. That's not happening here. Like the headquarters of CNRL is going to pack up and move to Toronto, because they don't want to, continue operating in Alberta. I mean, none of that's going to happen.
So how much time do you project it takes to negotiate the divorce with Canada and get to, those are 2 different answers, and get to a point where you actually have no income tax? Because it takes time to build infrastructure, to get the oil and natural gas and energy up to a place where you have massive revenues coming through.
No, I mean, all it takes is basically a law being passed that henceforth all money being collected or sent to the federal government will now be collected in Alberta, right? The day that that all the corporate income tax starts being collected in Alberta, the day that all the all the various GST, excise taxes, all the,
So it just
capital
stops
gains
being
taxes.
collected. So that's where it comes from.
No, it just, we just start collecting all of the taxes that otherwise going to the federal government in Alberta, right? And keep all the money here. So, it's, there's going to be a 6-month transition period probably or whatever. But, the minute every dollar that's currently going to the federal government starts getting collected by the Alberta Revenue Service and it stays in Alberta, is the day that the government starts operating. I mean, there's nothing, there's no magic to this. And then, but in part two, I mean, that's one of the reasons that one of the discussions that we're going to have in the United States is we're talking to, and whether it's, JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs or the U.S. Treasury, I mean, we want to negotiate and put together, a $500 billion U.S. Line of credit or credit facility, not a loan because we may not need it, but we want to have this $500 billion credit facility in place so that if there's any money, any shortfall, in the interim, it can easily be covered while we're sorting stuff out with Canada. But both Keith and I do not think that this has to be a lengthy, drawn out process.
Okay.
Right. We literally say, okay, here's the deal. April 1st of 2027, we're going to have a meeting. Everybody get ready for it. We'll send the invites out in January, First Nations leaders, provincial premiers, everybody, come to, Alberta on April 1st, because we're going to have a big constitutional convention on Alberta leaving Canada. And, we're giving you all 90 days. Here are the term sheets in advance. These are the terms that we're offering. Excuse me. And, protections for First Nations people, this, that, and the other thing, all the various packages, here they are. And, come to Alberta and let's roll up our sleeves and get this done. But by the way, you have 90 days, right?
Yeah.
And, if you do not negotiate in good faith, within a 90-day time frame, then, paragraph 155 of the secession reference comes into play, which is, unilateral declaration of independence based on international.
Where is that?
What's that?
The section one.
Well, it's paragraph 155 of the Supreme Court of Canada secession reference that says that it's open for a province to unilaterally declare independence. It wouldn't be constitutional, right, according to the Supreme Court, but it's open.
Okay.
Because then at that point, right, then it's just a matter of international recognition, and we're confident that we'd be recognized by the United States of America, Argentina, Hungary, Israel. Just think of all the countries whose eyes that Carney has intentionally stuck a finger in. Right? Yeah. There's lots of countries out there that don't think much of Mark Carney and don't think much of Canada right now. And there's lots of other countries that don't think much of Communist China and do not want Communist China continuing to control Alberta's oil and gas resources, which is effectively what's happening right now.
And that's actually undeniable. And we've done a lot of talk about China's influences within Canada, and it's
within Alberta,
and 100%, including Alberta.
I was watching our friend Moose on the Loose the other day, right? Yep. He's done a lot of great work on this.
Yes.
But showing Tim Hodgson's, the energy minister's connections to Meg Energy, Communist China, the takeover of Meg Energy by Communist China. Et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
right?
even like we did a dive into the oil tankers on the East Coast. We get it's like between 8 and 11 oil tankers a day on the East Coast from Saudi Arabia. Right. Every single day. Can you, we literally did a map of traffic on the ocean to show how much, here in the name of being green environmentalists, and yet we have the oil in the ground, and we have 11 tankers a day showing up on the East Coast. Just insane.
It's so I've always thought it was gonna be a lengthy, drawn out process, to be honest. And I feel like I'm informed more than the average citizen because I've been talking to lots of you guys and I've been researching and following it very closely. I always thought it would be a laborious
fish or cut bait. Right?
I love the simplicity you're saying.
And and that's it. And I mean,
which answers a lot of people's questions.
And I mean, Keith and I were actually talking about this yesterday on Rebel, and then afterwards, he and I, we hadn't spoken for a while just because we've both been really busy. So we had a really nice, hour or so long conversation in the afternoon to get caught up. And, we're both of the same view. All of this stuff can be dealt with really quickly. In fact, taking Alberta out of Canada and dividing the assets and figuring out what we're going to do legally and the rest of it between Alberta and Canada is a lot less complicated than a lot of big mergers and acquisitions, if you think about it, right? So, it's like there's, various assets. Alberta's, we have to like figure out what services Alberta's going to take over. It's pretty easy. Immigration and deportation, importantly, deportation, airports, customs and border patrol, military, post office. There's very few things or very few services that the federal government provides Albertans that are going to have to be replaced, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to need diversity and equity departments. We're not going to need Canadian heritage. We're not going to need, any of that stuff, right? That money gets wasted on. We're not going to need the CBC. We're not going to need, there's so many things that so much money gets wasted on. So, it's going to be a pretty simple, straightforward process. And if it takes any longer than 90 days, our position is you're not negotiating in good faith. I mean, this is it's a simple divorce, and we just need to figure out what the terms are. We need to provide, assurances, legal assurances and constitutional assurances that the rights of First Nations people in this province are going to continue to be respected and protected, et cetera, on a going forward basis. We simply, have we're going to have a new Alberta constitution that we're working on, and we're going to have a new government, obviously going forward.
Government structure as well, so a big difference.
But again, whatever we do, there's going to be a transitional position where the laws of Canada, like the criminal code, like we go to separate from Canada, we're not doing away with the criminal law, for goodness sake. But I mean, obviously all of the laws remain in place until such time as they're amended legally by the new, through the new processes of the, Alberta legislature, the Alberta Senate, and the Alberta executive that are going to be formed to deal with the new laws, deal with laws in the province of Alberta.
You suggested 3 branches there.
That's where we're going. No, all of us that are involved in the movement, we're all fed up with the Westminster parliamentary system and what effectively becomes an elected dictatorship, whether it's through the, the executive council or the privy council in Ottawa, right?
So it'll be fashioned after the United States Constitution.
Yeah, kind of a mix of U.S. and the U.S. system and the Swiss system. A lot of citizen participation, referenda, votes of citizens, limits on government spending, limits on limits on government borrowing.
Interesting.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Well, no doubt U.S. has the best system in the world. It's not perfect. There's a
lot
of issues.
And the great thing about it is that we've had 250 years to see all of the things that don't work. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as an example, like in the Constitution we're developing, the executive will have a line item veto, right? So that, if there's pork barrel spending coming out of the legislature where somebody's trying to build their 5th hospital in Thorhild or whatever it is, because, they want somebody else, they scratch somebody else's back and they want to waste, they want to spend another $1 billion on something that we don't need somewhere. No, that's out of that'll be able to be vetoed by the chief executive, right? The other big features are we don't want, some U.S. states have this, but it doesn't work the way it should. We don't think it's appropriate to have the Attorney General as a member of the cabinet, beholden to having their position, taken away by the Premier or the Prime Minister. So we want to have an elected Attorney General and an elected Auditor General that are specifically tasked with jailing crooked politicians, right? So, that we have real checks and balances, real enforcement, real, monitoring of what's going on. We want people that are elected to public positions to be actually worried about, behaving appropriately, as opposed to
that can be executed with transparency and that is amazing because I think as so many people are so fed up with seeing issues within Canada of politicians caught in blatant fraud, politicians caught in blatant abuse of power, etc., and no justice coming through, right?
Well,
so
the other thing too, like I was actually having a discussion with somebody online the other day, but they were talking, well, what should we call the chief executive? Like, should it be president? Should it be prime minister or whatever? And I actually responded, I said, like, I don't think either. I said, if it was up to me, it would be servant in chief.
Yeah.
Right. I want whoever it is that's, our new chief executive to be humble. I want a person that actually cares about the people, that's working for the people, that cares about the people, not the billionaires. Right? They're doing fine, right? Murray Edwards doesn't need another castle, right?
Well, the idea of being a public servant sometimes is lost. There's still a lot of great people.
No, and that's the problem. That's the problem with so many of our bureaucrats, right? They don't see themselves as public servants. They see themselves as public masters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's, I've been dealing with it nonstop since COVID. It's just gotten worse. I mean, the attitude of, various regulatory bureaucrats is just completely, completely bizarre as far as I'm concerned.
I don't know if you've seen that clip of Warren Buffett talking about incentivizing re-election based on GDP growth. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
He was saying like you should only be able to qualify for your being re-elected if the GDP is growing or not negative for two different. I don't remember the time periods he's saying, but I was like,
well,
so
yeah,
logical.
Well, and the other part about debt, the more that debt increases, the less politicians make.
Yeah.
Right. And there's a direct correlation to that, which incentivizes
incentivizing not just votes, but actual care of the country you've tasked to be.
Something
voted.
that everybody needs to internalize about why we need to get Alberta out of Canada. I saw a graph the other day on M2 money supply and the increase of money
Canada
printing.
by far leads.
Well, no. All of the other countries now, the U.S., Great Britain, Germany, Denmark, you name it, they're all now have realized that they've, thanks to COVID, they've printed as much money as they can. They've got to stop increasing the M2 money supply. Canada, it's still going up exponentially, okay? So what was going on before? We didn't notice what was happening before because Canada's money supply was basically increasing at the same rate of speed as the U.S. money supply, which is where people see things the most, right? Mm-hmm. So people are going, oh, okay, well, things are more expensive, but it's the same in the U.S. and it's the same, whatever, right? But now we have that break between the two, and it's going to become really evident really quickly that Canadians are just being robbed by our central bank and by Mark Carney, right? And for people that don't understand what this is or what I'm talking about when we talk about the M2 money supply, so you go to the grocery store and everybody knows that groceries now feel like they cost, or actually do cost, twice as much as they did 7 years ago, more than twice as much, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's not because groceries actually cost twice as much. It's because your money is worth half as much because they've doubled the amount of money in circulation. They've doubled the money supply.
Yeah.
So the long and the short of it is they've literally stolen 50% of your home equity. They've stolen 50% of your savings. They've stolen 50% of the value of your RSPs by inflating away the value of your dollars.
So you're talking about this chart right here. If you look on the right.
Oh, I know. I saw another one, but look at that. Look at the graph for Canadian money supply.
You got Germany who's following it. After that, you got mainland
which one's
China.
Canada? I can't see it.
Yellow.
It's the one that's going straight up towards right off the chart. Yeah. And see the other ones now, they were going up, but now they're starting to go sideways and they're capping the money supply. So they're going straight across. And like Japan right now is really curtailing, printing yen, and the US, they're curtailing printing US dollars. Like, if this keeps up, by this time next year, the Canadian dollar is going to be at 50 cents US.
This yellow line is literally the definition of exponential.
Yeah.
You look at exponential growth.
Exactly.
That is the definition.
I saw that graph the other day, and I immediately phoned a friend of mine. We started talking. I said, "Wow." I said, I guess all of us had better, if we're flight to safety, put everything in US dollars and US Treasury bills, because it's like you can't leave any of your savings in Canadian cash anymore.
You touched on a very good point.
This time next year, the Canadian dollar will be 50 cents.
Yeah, no, you touched on a very good point, because when it comes down to economics, people, and this is such a bad general misconception, they see more dollars available or in their account, they think they're wealthier. No, it comes back to buying power, because it doesn't actually cost you more to make a product, but you have to pay more for it because your value of the dollar is way less compared to what it was, right?
And everything you've worked so far to buy and have.
Every issue we have in Canada is that it all comes back. Well, most of it comes back to the way we do our economics. There's so many issues that's there. Yeah. Quick question.
Sure.
U.S. Alberta currency.
Absolutely.
Thoughts?
No, absolutely. We're the plan would be immediately a free and independent Alberta would transition to the U.S. dollar. Okay. Just because, again, the minute Alberta leaves Canada, the Canadian dollar will be plummeting in value and will be trading on par with the Polish zloty, right? So, U.S. dollars in transition, but then there is a plan to come up with a real dollar, real currency for Alberta based on real assets, gold, silver, Bitcoin, oil, where you have a basket of assets, of hard commodities that the dollar will be backed by, and that we will not be able to print any more money than we have physical assets, backing it up, right?
It's crazy
and we have to do that. I mean, we've got to get to real currency, and we've got to prevent. And we're not going to have a central bank. I mean, we're going to have we'll have a central currency agency, right? As an arm of the government. but it's going to be under those strict circumstances. So we're not going to need central bankers, swapping money back and forth and playing with interest rates and having this whole system effectively built on debt, because there won't be any debt. The currency is going to be backed by hard assets, not debt, right?
Interesting.
You've given a lot to think about. I had a lot more questions, but did anything come into your mind right away you want to get to?
Actually, one immediate question, you just kind of mentioned it slightly, but like, what about like the homeowner who owns a mortgage that's run out of Toronto or Ottawa, and if the bank they're with isn't in Alberta, like what would they do?
Well, I mean, it's a contract, right? It's
it's just
cross
country
and good for you if if all of a sudden the dollar that you owe your debt in is devalued to nothing. And you have other assets.
Yeah, actually,
that,
you're in a stronger position.
What's the old saying? He who dies owing the banks the most money wins, right?
One of my favorite lines off of I've said this before, Ocean's 11. One of the old rich dudes in Ocean's 11. He goes, I want to go out when I die, my last check bouncing.
No, that's right.
I just think that's.
But think about that. I mean, if you got mortgages that are denominated in Canadian dollar and the Canadian dollar completely crashes, like your dollar, as long as you've got other assets and you've moved, all of your cash and all of your other investments into U.S. dollars, you can just happily watch the Canadian dollar go to 10 cents and then pay your mortgage off, right?
So big five banks.
Well, but again, who cares, right? I mean, a free and independent Alberta, we can have Wells Fargo up here, we can have J.P. Morgan up here,
and they'll still be here most likely. I would assume.
Oh yeah, I mean, we could have U.S. banks, Canadian banks. I'm sure will continue to operate here. They've got offices. They're going to be generating profits. I mean, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
So. But we're gonna, Barclays, National West, any bank anywhere in the world that wants to open up a bank in Alberta is welcome to come and open a bank in Alberta.
It'd be in their interest to do so.
Exactly. We'll have an Alberta Stock Exchange. We'll have, all of the things that are, in Toronto. We're going to have here.
Okay.
And those are all. And think about all the jobs that's going to create.
Yeah,
we're going to have, a reinvigorated financial services industry. We're going to have a reinvigorated oil and gas industry, manufacturing industry, defense industries. I mean. The economy of Alberta is going to be going through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, but for the life of me, I can't understand why people run around. Oh my goodness, it's going to be so bad. Like, I don't
It's the risk of personalities come into it as well, but the risk of the unknown, because it's technically never been done in Canada, although you've seen this throughout history. But for people, just 74% of personalities and people don't like change. And the idea of that is, so that's part of the idea of how do you continue to communicate what the pros and cons are, right? And anyways, it's you've laid out a pretty strong case, as you have been for a while.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate being able to come on and chat with you guys. It's been a lot of fun this morning, and anytime you want to have me back, I'll come back. And hey, maybe next time I'll even be able to tell you how many signatures we have.
And I want US
first.
names.
Call us first.
And I want all the information.
Call us first. We'll go live.
We'll have you back 100%. We're going to try to arrange former Premier Kenny as well. We're going to work at that to see if we can do that. Because this is central to Albertans, right? In terms, especially over the next 6 months.
And let's have a pleasant adult conversation, right?
Okay.
I mean, I'm happy to do that, and I'd be happy to sit down with them and chat.
Yeah, awesome.
Excellent.
Any last words?
No, not at all. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
AlbertaProsperityProject.com. Go check out the Value of Freedom book. For all you guys who are watching, which camera I'm looking at, there we go. Go check it out. Find out for yourself the information that they're putting out in regards to Alberta independence. This affects all of us as Albertans. Also will drastically affect Canada, whichever, as you're predicting, going to be over the 50% and the 60% range. I am very interested. 1 year from now, we might be having some very different conversations on the show about what's happening, right?
Well, anytime towards the end of October. So October 20th, I'm happy to come back.
We're going to have you on a couple times before then to keep up with this. So thank you, Mr. Rath. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Thank you guys very much. God bless.
Yeah, we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.